Deal or no deal? That's been the question for months as Joe Biden has tried time and again to break the deadlock between members of his own party over a sweeping package that could make real many of his campaign promises, from affordable child care and free college to addressing climate change and tax unfairness. And the president was at it again today with back-to-back meetings trying to convince his party to back the effort because he needs every single Democrat to vote yes in the Senate to get this legislation through. Late this afternoon, key holdout Senator Joe Manchin reportedly said he would work with progressives in leadership to reach a deal by the end of the week. As for Senator Sinema, she is back from her fundraising junket in Europe, but as for the exact role she's playing here, I wouldn't even hazard a guess. Time is of the essence, however, because typically a president's party loses seats in midterm elections, but with plenty more of Biden's agenda at stake, including the future of voting rights and police reform, other Democrats are gearing up now to buck that historic midterm election trend. Among them, former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick, who's launching a new initiative to empower grassroots activists for 2022 and beyond. It's called Bridge Together. Governor Patrick, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Great to be with you, Jim. Thank you.
Could you flesh out this Bridge Together thing a little bit more than I did?
Sure.
What are you trying to achieve?
Sure. Well, this is an initiative of a so-called super PAC, a progressive super PAC called American Bridge 21st Century Foundation, which I co-chair. And it's about supporting local groups that are doing grassroots organizing all of the time instead of just in time, the way a lot of campaigns do. I think you know how important I believe grassroots campaigning is, this whole idea of meeting people where they are and getting them engaged in a given campaign. I think, in fact, it's important to do that all the time because grassroots organizing is really about community building, and we need more of a sense of community on a whole range of things, but certainly to build a more lasting progressive movement.
Where's the money coming from?
Private donors who are giving to this C3, which is a not-for-profit organization. We're about identifying existing local groups in 3 key states at the outset, in Arizona and in Georgia and Pennsylvania. I hope we'll be able to expand, depending on the amount of money we raise, to Wisconsin and North Carolina. But there are great groups working on the ground with their neighbors, building relationships of trust, really important in dealing with, the amount of disinformation out there and just making sure that people have trusted sources of information. It's also important in terms of helping people get ready for the new barriers to voting that have been imposed in many, many states. And I think this will be how we overcome some of that.
So speaking of 2022, though, while obviously the Republicans have been obstructionists on the whole Biden agenda, the Democrats do control the House and the Senate, albeit by a modest margin. If they don't deliver, what is it that grassroots activists are going to be trying to sell to people? Aren't the Democrats to be held accountable if they can't deliver?
I think what the grassroots folks will be doing are selling alternative candidates, frankly, if Democrats don't deliver. We have, control, Jim, is a funny term to use right now when, in fact, we have such, as you mentioned, a thin margin of Democrats, and Democrats, as usual, represent a range of views. But the point here is that Democrats are all trying to do what we can in government to help people help themselves, instead of just saying to the general public, you're on your own. And when it comes to issues like climate change, it comes to issues like the ability of families to work and also have families and be supported in that. When it comes to fixing neglected roads, rails, and bridges and expanding broadband, it will take government playing a role. And I think that there are ways in which all of the sides, and it's not just both sides, but all of the sides among the Democrats are trying to find their way to yes. Even a scaled down human infrastructure bill at the numbers folks have been talking about and the components of it is transformational. I think will become such an institutional part of the way Americans think of rebuilding the American dream that when it's time to renew, it will get renewed.
I want to stay on this topic, and I was going to use the expression drill down, which I hate. I don't know why it came into my head,
You
but I'm
used
going
it.
to
Go
focus
ahead.
a little bit more. It's too late. I woke up this morning. First thing I did was watch a TED Talk from you, and you were talking about your worries about democracy. I'm going to quote you back to you. You said, "It's tricky to love a country which doesn't love you back." And you went on to say, many times in our history, American democracy has been closed to black people. Well, it seems to me that Democrats in the Congress are allowing it to remain closed to many black people and low-income people around this country by their refusal, including the president, by the way, to deal with the filibuster so that these voting rights protection bills can pass. How can you support Democrats? How can your funds support Democrats who allow that to happen?
Well, first of all, I think the filibuster has outlived its usefulness. I think that there are, or at least we hear from some of the so-called moderates in the Senate, that there will be Republican votes when it's time to call the vote on the voting reform bills that are before the Senate. The House has moved them, as you know. But I think we're going to have to confront that obstacle from the Republicans and the filibuster once more before the question gets called to eliminate the filibuster. Frankly, we should have made that exception when it comes to issues having to do with the vitality and integrity of our democracy before now. If it were up to me, it's not up to me. But I'll tell you, the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans is that the Democrats are actually interested in having a fair fight, having a contest of ideas, and having people contest that. And Republicans have shown that they are not.
Don't you think, though, that Joe Biden is sort of denying the reality of 2021 American politics by still laying back on this whole filibuster thing?
No, I think that I'm not in Joe Biden's head or in his, in his White House. But my guess is that he is trying not to make the filibuster the center of attention until he is able to get the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better bill through.
Okay.
And then we turn to voting rights. I wish we'd have done this already. I frankly think if we dealt with the filibuster already, we might have been able to get these other bills done. But if what it's going to come down to, Jim, is making an exception in the filibuster for fundamentals like access to the ballot and the integrity of that ballot, I think at a minimum, we ought to make that exception, and we'll get to that.
I believe your terms as governor overlapped at least some degree with Joe Manchin's term as governor of West Virginia. And in fact, I think I read today that he was chair of the National Governors Association for a while, I think a year there while you were governor. I'm serious. Do you have any insight into this man or his agenda or what moves him or why he is stopping movement here?
Well, it's frustrating for me from this distance. I think of Joe Manchin as a friend of mine. He and Gail were incredibly welcoming to Diane and me when we went to what was called then New Governor's School in West Virginia shortly after the election with other newly elected governors, and he and they together have been gracious to us ever since. I talked to him a lot when Barack Obama first went into the White House, and we were working with him on a number of initiatives around the administration. I don't know that I understand the politics of West Virginia the way he does. I'm not sure anybody does. I think I'd be surprised to find the politics of West Virginia quite as sort of frozen as he sometimes projects it being. I mean, there are an awful lot of people, for example, in the coal industry who understand that coal is a declining industry and has been for some while, and who'd like to feel and ought to feel they have a stake in a green, clean energy future. And I think President Biden, at least during the campaign, has been expressive about that, just as one example. And there are many, many of the other programs that Democrats are talking about, which would be hugely important to the people he represents, again, from what I know of them. So, yeah. The heart of puzzle, frankly, is Senator Sinema.
Yeah, wherever she is. You know, Governor, you mentioned you're not in the White House. There were reports, as obviously as you know, that you were in the running for the Attorney General's position. A lot of people, including Democrats, are saying Merrick Garland would have been a great justice on the Supreme Court, not such a hot Attorney General. And I'll quote you again from your TED Talk that I watched at 5 o'clock this morning. Leaders in this country have encouraged deadly assault to overturn our election. One of those leaders is the former president of the United States. And people like Larry Tribe on this show and elsewhere have said there are reasons to, at minimum, investigate him, at maximum, to charge him. Merrick Garland doesn't appear to be doing either. Are you among his critics, or are you not?
You know, I know Merrick. I think he would have been a great justice on the Supreme Court, and I think he's doing a very good job as Attorney General. And I think the difference between Merrick and what we have had in Washington in that post and in many others is that he's going to do the work without crowing about it until he has something to say. And so I wouldn't presume that because they're not leaking information or giving status updates and all that about the investigations, that there is no investigation. He is a very methodical, serious lawyer and jurist, and I think he's just the right pick for the moment we're in.
Well, you're a pretty good lawyer. Do you think Donald Trump has committed crimes for which he should be charged?
Look, for all that I have been able to see and watch, they were sort of open and notorious crimes. He's not the only one. And typically in a high-profile prosecution of this kind, there's an awful lot that is done to make the case lower down and to build toward the higher ups. And I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect that that's what's happening in this case.
Governor, we only have a minute or two left. Last time you were here, we were talking about your co-chairmanship of this Future of Tech Commission. I know the commission released a survey last week showing that overwhelming majorities of Democrats and Republicans believe the tech community should be held accountable for, quote, harmful and illegal content. We just lived through the whistleblower at Facebook talking about Facebook, not surprisingly, putting profits over safety, particularly of young women, of girls. We know about their allowing misinformation, deadly misinformation about COVID to go online. What's the cure, do you believe, and what's your commission going to recommend as the cure?
Jim, I have learned so much. I'm not a techie. I've learned so much from talking to techies and advocates and researchers and academics and many, many others about the ways in which the harvesting of data about us, a lot of which we don't even know is happening, how that is used, how that is aggregated, how it's disaggregated, how it's sold, and to whom. And you may think at any given time, as I say among my commissioners, I go online to order a pair of jeans. How does that ultimately turn in to my getting information from QAnon, for example? And I have come to understand how that happens. We all have. We've been working hard on our recommendations. We're not done yet. I'm not going to announce them here until we're ready to announce them. But I think we have some insights into some fixes that can help. I think we are certain at this point, as are most people instinctively, that leaving it to the industry alone to, as it were, police themselves and self-regulate is just not working.
We only have 15 seconds. When are we going to see those recommendations?
Well, I hope in the coming weeks. It may slip until December. I know the White House is trying to work on some of the other things we've been talking about right now. And we want to make sure that we have their undivided attention when the time comes.
Looking forward to them. Governor Patrick, it's good to see you as always. Thanks.
Good to be with you, Jim. Take care.